The cameras had never been about security. They had been about trust, or rather the complete absence of it. Every night after the lights dimmed across the Romano estate, Vincent Romano sat alone in a private room hidden behind his home office. The room contained 12 monitors mounted across a wall of dark wood panels, each displaying a different part of the mansion. Hallways. Living rooms. The library. The kitchen. The garden. Most people would have assumed a powerful man watched those screens because he feared enemies. The truth was far sadder. Vincent watched because years of disappointment had convinced him that everyone eventually revealed a selfish motive. Employees wanted money. Business partners wanted influence. Friends wanted favors. Even family members often wanted something. After losing his wife 3 years earlier, that belief had only grown stronger. The greatest casualty had been his 8-year-old daughter, Emily. Once a cheerful child, she now spent most days quiet and withdrawn while struggling with a chronic illness that left her exhausted more often than not. Specialists came and went. Tutors arrived and left. Caregivers rarely stayed longer than a few months. Some lacked patience. Others lacked compassion. Vincent paid generously, yet nothing seemed capable of filling the emptiness that had settled over the house. Then Alicia Brooks arrived. She was not hired as a nurse. She was hired as a maid. A 31-year-old black woman with a calm voice, warm eyes, and a resume that looked almost ordinary. Vincent barely remembered their interview. He had approved her employment because the estate manager recommended her. That was all. During her first week, Vincent paid little attention to her. The mansion employed dozens of people. One more maid hardly seemed important. Yet late one evening, while reviewing security footage from the day, he noticed something unexpected. Emily was sitting alone in the sunroom, staring through a window at the gardens outside. Alicia entered carrying fresh towels. Most employees would have completed their task and left. Instead, Alicia paused. She noticed the little girl sitting silently and offered a gentle smile. Emily did not respond. Alicia did not seem offended. She simply folded the towels and quietly sat in a nearby chair. Minutes passed. Neither spoke. Vincent watched the monitor with mild curiosity. Then something unusual happened. Emily moved closer. Just a few inches at first. Then a little more. Alicia began telling a story about a stray dog she had known as a child. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extraordinary. Yet by the end of the story, a small smile appeared on Emily's face. Vincent leaned forward in his chair. He had not seen that smile in weeks. The footage continued. Alicia eventually returned to work and Emily remained by the window. But the little girl was still smiling. For reasons Vincent could not explain, he replayed the recording. Then he watched it again. And again. In a mansion filled with luxury, private doctors, and every comfort money could buy, the only thing that had managed to reach his daughter that day was a simple act of kindness from someone who did not even know she was being watched. And for the first time in a very long time, Vincent found himself looking at one of the monitors not with suspicion, but with hope. Over the following days, Vincent found himself returning to the camera room more often than he cared to admit. At first he told himself he was simply monitoring the estate, following the same routine he had maintained for years. Yet deep down he knew that was no longer true. His attention kept drifting toward whichever room Alicia happened to be working in. Not because he distrusted her. Quite the opposite. He was trying to understand something that no report, background check, or interview could explain. Every morning Alicia arrived before sunrise. She greeted the kitchen staff by name. She thanked people for small favors. She never seemed rushed even when her schedule was packed with responsibilities. Most employees completed their assignments efficiently and moved on. Alicia completed hers while somehow making people feel seen. Vincent noticed details that nobody else seemed to notice. When one of the gardeners injured his wrist carrying supplies, Alicia quietly brought him ice and a cup of coffee. When an elderly housekeeper forgot where she left her reading glasses, Alicia spent 20 minutes helping her search the mansion. None of those actions were required. None earned additional pay. Yet she did them anyway. Then came the evening that truly captured Vincent's attention. Emily had been struggling through one of her more difficult days. Her energy was low. Her appetite was poor. She had barely spoken during dinner. After the doctors left, she retreated to her room without touching the books she usually enjoyed. Vincent watched from the camera room as Alicia entered carrying fresh linens. Emily sat quietly on her bed staring at the floor. The room remained silent for several moments. Alicia finished her work and headed toward the door. Then she paused. She turned back and looked at the little girl. "Would you like me to tell you something embarrassing?" she asked gently. Emily looked up with mild curiosity. Alicia smiled. "When I was 10 years old, I tried to teach my grandmother's cat how to play basketball." Emily blinked. "A cat?" "A very stubborn cat." For the first time all day, Emily looked interested. Alicia sat beside a nearby chair and began describing the ridiculous adventure. She spoke about tiny homemade basketball hoops, treats used as motivation, and a cat that seemed determined to ignore every lesson. The story lasted nearly 15 minutes. By the end, Emily was laughing. Not a polite smile. Not a brief reaction. Genuine laughter. Vincent froze in front of the monitors. The sound filled the room through the speakers. He could not remember the last time he had heard his daughter laugh like that. When Alicia eventually stood to leave, Emily spoke before she reached the door. "Can you come back tomorrow?" Alicia's expression softened. "If you want me to." Emily nodded immediately. "I do." Alicia smiled and wished her good night. After she left, Emily picked up a book and began reading. Vincent remained motionless in his chair long after the screen went quiet. The mansion suddenly felt different. Warmer somehow. And as he watched the monitor one final time before shutting it off for the night, he realized he was no longer looking for reasons to doubt Alicia. He was beginning to look forward to seeing what she would do next. As the weeks passed, a quiet routine began to form inside the Romano estate. Every evening, after the staff completed their duties and the long hallways settled into silence, Alicia found herself spending a little more time near Emily's room. It was never part of her job description. Nobody asked her to do it. Yet somehow it felt natural. Emily had started waiting for her. Some nights it was a story. Other nights it was a simple conversation about school, favorite animals, or places they wanted to visit someday. Through the camera screens, Vincent watched those moments unfold with growing fascination. One rainy Thursday evening, a storm rolled across the city. Wind rattled the tall windows while distant thunder rolled through the dark sky. Emily had been struggling all day. Her energy was low and her mood even lower. She barely touched her dinner and refused to join her tutor for lessons. By the time evening arrived, she had retreated beneath her blanket and turned away from everyone. Even the doctors had been unable to cheer her up. Vincent was delayed by meetings and did not return home until after 9 o'clock. As usual, he entered the monitoring room before going upstairs. The screens illuminated the darkness around him. Most of the mansion appeared quiet. Then one monitor caught his attention. Emily's bedroom. Alicia sat beside the bed holding a small notebook. The little girl looked exhausted. Alicia opened the notebook and began sketching something. Emily watched without enthusiasm. After a few moments, Alicia turned the page around. Emily frowned. Then she laughed softly. Vincent leaned closer to the screen. Alicia had drawn what appeared to be a giraffe wearing cowboy boots and sunglasses. The drawing was terrible. Deliberately terrible. Alicia created another one. Then another. Soon Emily was laughing harder than Vincent had heard in months. The room seemed brighter despite the storm outside. After a while, Emily's laughter faded into a thoughtful silence. She stared at the ceiling. "Do you ever miss people?" she asked quietly. Alicia's smile softened. "Every day." Emily looked toward her. "Even if they are gone?" Alicia nodded. "Especially then." For several seconds neither spoke. Rain tapped gently against the windows. Finally Emily whispered, "I miss my mom." Alicia reached over and held the little girl's hand. There was no dramatic speech. No perfect answer. Just quiet understanding. "I know," Alicia said gently. Emily squeezed her hand and rested her head against the pillow. Through the monitor, Vincent felt something tighten in his chest. He had spent years trying to protect his daughter from sadness. Alicia was doing something entirely different. She was teaching Emily how to live with it. An hour later, Emily fell asleep. Alicia carefully tucked the blanket around her and quietly left the room. Vincent remained seated in front of the screens long after the image stopped changing. For the first time since his wife's passing, he realized that healing did not always arrive through medicine, specialists, or expensive treatments. Sometimes it arrived through patience. Through kindness. Through someone willing to sit beside a hurting child during a storm and simply stay there. The following week brought a small but meaningful change to the Romano estate. For the first time in years, Emily began leaving her room without being encouraged. It started with breakfast. Then a short walk through the garden. Then afternoons spent reading in the sunroom instead of hiding behind closed doors. Nobody announced the improvement. Nobody celebrated it publicly. Yet everyone noticed. Most of all, Vincent. Each evening, he found himself sitting before the monitors a little longer than intended. What began as observation had slowly become anticipation. He wanted to see whether Emily smiled that day. He wanted to know if she had eaten well. He wanted to hear her laugh. More often than not, Alicia seemed to be somewhere nearby whenever those moments happened. One afternoon, Emily sat at a large table in the library surrounded by art supplies. Sheets of paper were scattered everywhere. Colored pencils rolled across the polished wood surface. Alicia was dusting nearby shelves when Emily suddenly frowned at her drawing and pushed it away. "It looks terrible," the little girl muttered. Alicia glanced over. "Compared to what?" Emily crossed her arms. "Compared to what I imagined." Alicia smiled knowingly. "That happens to everyone." Emily looked skeptical. "Even grown-ups?" Alicia laughed softly. "Especially grown-ups." She picked up a blank sheet of paper and began drawing beside her. Through the camera screen, Vincent watched as the two compared sketches. Neither drawing was particularly impressive, but that hardly mattered. What mattered was the expression on Emily's face. She looked relaxed. Comfortable. Safe. The kind of comfort that money could never purchase. Later that evening, another moment captured Vincent's attention. Emily had fallen asleep on a couch in the sunroom after a long day. Alicia entered carrying folded laundry. She noticed the sleeping child immediately. Instead of waking her, she carefully set the laundry aside, found a soft blanket, and gently covered Emily before lowering the room lights. Then she quietly resumed her work. The gesture lasted less than 30 seconds. Alicia never looked toward a camera. She never expected praise. She simply cared. Vincent replayed that moment 3 times. Something about its simplicity affected him more than grand gestures ever could. The next morning, Vincent's sister Catherine arrived for a visit. She had always been protective of him, especially since his wife's passing. During lunch she casually mentioned Alicia. "That maid spends a lot of time with Emily," Catherine observed. Vincent nodded. "Emily likes her." Catherine raised an eyebrow. Or perhaps she understands exactly how to make herself valuable. The comment lingered in the room. Vincent said nothing at first. Months ago, he might have agreed. Years ago, he certainly would have. But now he remembered dozens of quiet moments recorded by the cameras. Kindness offered when nobody was watching. Patience without reward. Compassion without audience. Catherine saw an employee. Vincent was beginning to see something entirely different. That evening, after his sister left, he returned to the monitor room once again. On one screen, Emily and Alicia sat together reading beside a window glowing with sunset light. The scene appeared so peaceful that Vincent found himself smiling without realizing it. For the first time in a very long time, the mansion no longer felt like a place haunted by loss. It was slowly becoming a home again. One Friday afternoon, the fragile peace that had settled over the Romano estate faced an unexpected test. The house was unusually busy. Contractors inspected part of the West Wing, accountants met with Vincent in his office, and staff moved constantly through the hallways. Amid the activity, Alicia followed her normal routine, making sure Emily felt comfortable and included rather than overwhelmed by the noise. Around noon, Emily seemed more tired than usual. She spent most of the morning reading quietly in the sunroom and eventually fell asleep in a chair beside the windows. Alicia covered her with a blanket and continued her work nearby. Later that afternoon, while organizing supplies in a storage room, Alicia received a phone call. Through the camera system, Vincent happened to notice her step into a quiet corner to answer. He had no intention of listening closely, but one sentence immediately caught his attention. "I understand," Alicia said softly. "It is a wonderful opportunity." Vincent looked up from the monitor. Alicia listened for a long moment before responding again. "The salary is generous. I truly appreciate the offer." Vincent felt an unexpected tension settle in his chest. A job offer. He told himself it should not matter. Employees came and went. That was how life worked. Yet he found himself continuing to watch. Alicia thanked the caller and promised to provide an answer by the end of the day. After the call ended, she stood quietly for several seconds. Her expression revealed genuine conflict. That evening, the answer arrived. Emily had spent most of the afternoon feeling weak and emotionally drained. By dinner time she barely touched her food and retreated to the library sofa with a book resting unopened in her lap. Alicia found her there shortly before sunset. The little girl attempted a smile but quickly lowered her eyes. Alicia sat beside her. "Rough day?" Emily nodded. "Everything feels hard today." Alicia gently squeezed her hand. For the next several hours, she stayed with Emily. They talked. They read together. They watched the changing colors of the sky through the tall windows. At one point Emily fell asleep with her head resting against Alicia's shoulder. Meanwhile, Alicia's phone vibrated twice with reminders about the job offer waiting for a response. She never looked at it. Much later that evening, after Emily was comfortably asleep in her room, Alicia finally opened the message. The position offered nearly double her current salary. Better benefits. Greater stability. A chance to solve many of her own financial struggles. Vincent watched from the monitor room as she quietly typed a response. Then she pressed send. Curious, he later asked his estate manager to verify something. The answer arrived the following morning. Alicia had declined the offer. Not because the opportunity lacked value. Not because she feared change. She had turned it down because she did not want to leave Emily during one of the most vulnerable periods of the child's life. Sitting alone in front of the monitors, Vincent stared at the screens in silence. Nobody had asked Alicia to make that sacrifice. Nobody even knew she had made it. Nobody except the cameras. And for the first time, Vincent realized that what Alicia was giving his daughter could never be measured by a paycheck. The realization arrived gradually, then all at once. For months, Vincent had believed he was protecting Emily by providing everything she could possibly need. The best doctors. The finest schools. The most comfortable home. Yet as he sat alone in front of the glowing monitors one quiet evening, he was forced to confront a painful truth. Whenever Emily felt frightened, she called for Alicia. Whenever she felt discouraged, she searched for Alicia. Whenever she had good news, she wanted Alicia to hear it first. At first, the realization stung. Not because he was jealous, but because he knew why it was happening. Alicia was present. She was there for the small moments. The ordinary moments. The moments that slowly built trust. Vincent thought back to countless evenings spent in meetings, business dinners, and endless responsibilities. He had convinced himself that he was doing it all for Emily. Yet somehow he had missed pieces of her childhood while standing only a few rooms away. One afternoon, the truth became impossible to ignore. Emily was working on a school project in the library when she accidentally knocked a stack of papers onto the floor. Frustrated, she buried her face in her hands. Alicia immediately sat beside her and helped reorganize everything. Through the camera feed, Vincent watched as Emily relaxed almost instantly. The little girl smiled and continued working. The interaction lasted less than 10 minutes. Yet Vincent could not stop thinking about it. Later that night, he found Emily sitting in the sunroom wrapped in a blanket while watching rain move across the garden. He decided to join her. The conversation began awkwardly. They spoke about school. Then books. Then the weather. For a while neither seemed to know what to say. Finally Emily looked up at him. "Dad?" Vincent smiled gently. "Yes?" Emily hesitated. "Do you think people can help fix broken hearts?" The question caught him completely off guard. He considered several answers before choosing honesty. "I think they can help us carry them." Emily seemed to think about that. Then she nodded slowly. "Alicia does that." Vincent looked toward the rain outside the window. His chest tightened. Not because the statement hurt. Because it was true. Alicia had been helping Emily carry grief that even he struggled to understand. The next morning, Vincent reviewed several weeks of footage. Not because he suspected anything. Quite the opposite. He found himself revisiting moments that mattered. Alicia helping Emily finish a difficult assignment. Alicia encouraging her during a frustrating day. Alicia celebrating tiny victories nobody else noticed. There was never an audience. Never a reward. Never any expectation of recognition. Every act came from genuine care. As the recordings played across the screens, Vincent finally understood what had been changing inside him. It was not admiration alone. It was gratitude. Respect. And something deeper that he was not yet ready to name. For the first time in years, he could see a future that did not feel defined by loss. And at the center of that future stood a woman who had quietly transformed an entire home without ever realizing someone had been watching. Autumn arrived quietly, painting the trees surrounding the Romano estate in shades of gold and amber. The season seemed to bring new life not only to the gardens but also to the people living inside the mansion. Emily looked healthier. She smiled more often. Some days she even ran through the hallways with enough energy to make the staff laugh. The change was not miraculous, nor was it perfect. She still faced difficult days. Yet hope had returned, and that alone felt extraordinary. One Saturday afternoon, Alicia and Emily sat beneath a large oak tree near the edge of the property. They were working on a scrapbook filled with photographs, drawings, and memories. Emily carefully glued a picture onto a page while Alicia helped organize colorful decorations around it. Vincent watched from a nearby terrace rather than through a camera. Lately he had been spending more time physically present. It was a habit he was still learning. Emily looked up from the scrapbook. Can I ask something? Alicia smiled. Of course. The little girl thought for a moment before speaking. Can somebody become family even if they were not there at the beginning? The question seemed simple. Yet it carried a weight that instantly changed the atmosphere. Alicia paused. Her eyes softened. I think family is not only about where people start, she said gently. Sometimes it is about who stays. Emily looked down at the scrapbook page in front of her. So somebody can become family later? Alicia nodded. Absolutely. Emily appeared satisfied with the answer and returned to her project. But Vincent remained frozen on the terrace. The words followed him throughout the rest of the day. That evening, after Emily had gone to bed, he found himself sitting once again in the monitoring room. The screens glowed softly in the darkness. Yet for the first time, he barely looked at them. Instead, he replayed the conversation in his mind. Family is not only about where people start. Sometimes it is about who stays. The truth struck him harder than he expected. Alicia had stayed. Through difficult days. Through long nights. Through moments when nobody would have blamed her for leaving. She had stayed when opportunities pulled her elsewhere. She had stayed when Emily needed comfort. She had stayed when grief lingered in every corner of the house. And somehow, without anyone noticing, she had become part of the foundation holding the family together. The following morning, Vincent joined Emily for breakfast before work. The little girl seemed unusually cheerful. Halfway through the meal, she looked up at him. Dad? Yes? Emily smiled. Do you know what my favorite part of the house is now? Vincent shook his head. What? Emily thought carefully. Wherever the people I love are. The answer left him speechless. A few months earlier, Emily would have pointed toward a room, a toy, or a garden. Now she spoke about people. About connection. About belonging. After breakfast, Vincent watched Alicia helping staff prepare for the day. She laughed with one employee, helped another carry supplies, and greeted everyone with the same quiet kindness she always showed. There was nothing dramatic about the scene. Nothing designed to impress anyone. Yet standing there, Vincent finally stopped searching for explanations. What he felt was no longer confusion. No longer curiosity. It was something much deeper. And for the first time since losing his wife, the possibility of opening his heart no longer felt impossible. A few days later, Vincent made a decision he could no longer postpone. The cameras had shown him countless moments of kindness, patience, and sacrifice, but they had also created a secret that now weighed heavily on his conscience. Every meaningful feeling he carried toward Alicia had been built upon observations she never knew existed. If there was to be honesty between them, the truth could not remain hidden forever. The opportunity arrived on a quiet evening after dinner. Emily had fallen asleep early after an active day in the garden, and the mansion had settled into its usual calm. Alicia was organizing books in the library when Vincent entered. The room glowed softly beneath warm lamps while rain tapped gently against distant windows. For a moment neither spoke. Alicia smiled politely. Is everything all right? Vincent nodded, though his expression remained unusually serious. There is something I need to show you. Curiosity crossed her face as he led her through a hallway she had rarely used. Eventually they arrived outside a private room. Vincent opened the door. Alicia stepped inside and immediately stopped. The wall of monitors illuminated the darkness. Screens displayed different areas of the estate. Hallways. Gardens. Common rooms. Her expression shifted from confusion to surprise. Vincent took a slow breath. I should have told you sooner. Alicia stared at the monitors. You have been watching the house? For years. She turned toward him. Including the staff? Vincent lowered his eyes briefly. Yes. Silence filled the room. Alicia looked back at the screens, slowly processing what she was seeing. Hurt flickered across her face. Not anger. Disappointment. You watched all this time, she asked quietly. Vincent nodded. I did. The answer hung heavily between them. For several seconds neither moved. Then Vincent stepped toward one of the monitors and activated a recording. Alicia watched herself sitting beside Emily during a difficult afternoon. Another recording appeared. Then another. She saw herself reading stories, helping with school projects, comforting tears, celebrating small victories, and sitting quietly beside a lonely child who needed company. Hundreds of ordinary moments passed across the screens. Moments she barely remembered. Moments she never performed for recognition because she never expected anyone to see them. Vincent's voice remained calm. I spent years believing everyone wanted something from me. Another recording played. Emily laughing at one of Alicia's terrible drawings. Then I started watching these. Alicia remained silent. Vincent continued. You never knew anyone was looking. That is why they mattered. The room grew still. Alicia looked at the screens again. For the first time, she saw the collection of small choices that had quietly changed an entire family. Vincent finally met her eyes. You helped my daughter heal. His voice softened. And somewhere along the way, you helped me heal too. Alicia felt tears forming but quickly blinked them away. Outside, rain continued falling beyond the estate windows. Inside the monitor room, something shifted. The secret was no longer hidden. The truth now stood between them, vulnerable and honest. And for the first time, Alicia began to understand that what Vincent felt for her had never started with admiration for appearances. It had started with witnessing her heart when she believed nobody was watching. 2 weeks after the conversation in the monitor room, the atmosphere inside the Romano estate felt different. The truth had not driven Alicia away. It had not erased the trust built over months of quiet moments. Instead, it had opened a door neither she nor Vincent had expected. They spoke more openly now. They shared meals when schedules allowed. They spent evenings talking with Emily in the sunroom while autumn sunlight painted the gardens gold beyond the windows. For the first time in years, laughter felt natural inside the house. One Saturday afternoon, Vincent invited Alicia and Emily to the garden behind the estate. The air was crisp and cool. Leaves drifted gently across the walking paths. The fountain at the center of the garden reflected the soft afternoon light. Alicia assumed it was simply another family outing. Emily, however, seemed unusually excited. She kept smiling to herself as though she knew a secret she was struggling to keep. Vincent guided them toward a large oak tree near the edge of the property. It was the same place where Emily had once asked whether people could become family even if they were not there at the beginning. The memory lingered quietly between them. They stopped beneath the tree. For a moment nobody spoke. The wind moved softly through the branches overhead. Then Vincent turned toward Alicia. His expression carried a sincerity she had never seen before. For a long time, he began, I believed trust was something people eventually lost. Alicia listened quietly. Emily stood beside them holding Vincent's hand. Then you came into our lives, he continued. You did not change things through grand gestures. You changed them through 1,000 small acts of kindness. Alicia felt emotion rising in her chest. Vincent's voice remained steady. You stayed when leaving would have been easier. You cared for Emily when nobody asked you to. You gave her comfort when I did not know how. He glanced toward his daughter. Emily smiled through tears already forming in her eyes. Vincent looked back at Alicia. You brought life back into this home. Silence settled around them. The kind of silence filled with meaning rather than emptiness. Slowly, Vincent reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small ring box. Alicia's eyes widened. Emily covered her mouth with both hands, unable to hide her excitement any longer. Vincent opened the box. The ring sparkled softly beneath the afternoon sunlight. Yet somehow it felt less important than the words that followed. "This is not because of what you did for me," Vincent said gently. "And it is not because of what you did for Emily." He took a slow breath. "It is because of who you are when nobody is watching." Tears finally slipped down Alicia's cheeks. Vincent smiled softly. "Alicia Brooks, would you let us become your family?" Emily immediately wrapped her arms around Alicia before she could even answer. The little girl was crying openly now. Alicia laughed through her tears and held her tightly. Then she looked at Vincent. The man who once trusted only cameras had learned to trust a human heart again. "Yes," she whispered. "Of course, yes." Emily cheered. Vincent laughed. And beneath the old oak tree, surrounded by falling autumn leaves and the people who mattered most, a family was not created through wealth, power, or obligation. It was created through kindness. And for the first time since loss had entered their lives, all three of them finally felt whole.